Coverage of the Algiers Summit. A special coverage and interviews from several gas-producing and exporting countries will be broadcast by the Algerian radio thanks to its network of correspondents.
محمد بن سلطان مبعوث الإذاعة الجزائرية إلى العاصمة القطرية الدوحة.
سي دكار ثم ناخذ السنغال كريم الحاج محمد مشقعنا راديو ثغنمت.
رابح هوادف مبعوث الإذاعة الجزائرية إلى العاصمة الموريتانية نقشو.
You can follow the event from February 29 to March 2nd on the waves and digital platforms of the Algerian radio.
With Radio Algeria International, you will not miss a single major political or economic event. Radio Algeria International, our voice in the world.
This is the English service of Radio Algeria International. It's time for the news.
Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf has said from Addis Ababa that Algeria will work during her mandate at the head of the African peer review mechanism on encouraging dialogue and consultation among all stakeholders to develop solutions likely to strengthen peace and security in Africa. And the Minister of Foreign Affairs has called on African countries to support the Palestinian cause and contribute to the international diplomatic efforts. And as the Palestinian presidency reiterated that the creation of a Palestinian state with Jerusalem as capital remains key for the region's stability, the Israeli occupation pursued its bombardments of Gaza, causing more deaths. And those were the major developments. Now the full news edition. Good afternoon. President of the Republic Abdelmajid Tebboune has chaired a meeting of the Council of Ministers during which he has taken several decisions in different sectors. The President has ordered that the transportation of pilgrims living in the south and far south of the country to airports to be at the expense of the state. The President also ordered the development of pilot farms into production units specialized in vegetables, oilseeds, and oilseed trees. He also ordered the start of well drilling and groundwater prospecting in the two provinces of Bouira and Bashar. The President then insisted on speeding up the pace of work until the total digitalization of all sectors. He also ordered the improvement of the presentation on the status and compensation for the benefit of specific bodies of national education. The Army Chief of Staff Army General Said Chengriha is starting today an official visit to Rwanda as part of the reinforcement of cooperation between the National People's Army and Rwanda's armed forces. According to a communique issued by the Defense Ministry, the visit made by the Army Chief of Staff at the invitation of his Rwandan counterpart, the Army General will be devoted to the examining of issues of common concern. And Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf has said from Addis Ababa that Algeria will work during her mandate at the head of the African peer review mechanism on encouraging dialogue and consultation among all stakeholders to develop solutions likely to strengthen peace and security in Africa. In a statement on the report of the Forum of Heads of State and Government of the African peer review mechanism, Mr. Attaf said the decline of democratic values due to the dangerous wave of unconstitutional government changes, particularly in West Africa, emphasizes the need for such mechanisms to stick to the values of their creation.
This mechanism has undoubtedly proven its indispensable nature and its effectiveness, and undoubtedly contributed to strengthening the principles of good governance in our continent. In this line, Algeria will dedicate its mandate to encouraging and intensifying dialogue, consultation and coordination among all stakeholders to crystallize African solutions to African problems. Solutions that emanate from African context and that take into consideration our external environment that surrounds us, and solutions that aims at strengthening peace, security and political stability, and promoting economic development and common prosperity in our continent.
That was the statement of Foreign Affairs Minister Ahmed Attaf with regard to the report on the Forum of Heads of State and Government of the African Peer Review Mechanism. The Minister of Foreign Affairs was received also in Addis Ababa by the Vice President of the Republic of Sierra Leone. During the meeting, the two parties examined means of strengthening the privileged relations uniting the two brotherly countries as part of the following up of the results of the official visit paid by the President of Sierra Leone to Algeria in January. And the Foreign Minister also had bilateral meetings with the Deputy Prime Minister of the Federal Republic of Somalia, Mr. Salah Ahmed Jama. During the meeting, the two sides examined means of strengthening bilateral cooperation and exchanged views on the situation in the region. We're still with the activities of the Foreign Minister, and he also had bilateral meetings with the Foreign Affairs Minister of the Republic of Chad, Mohamed Salah Nadif, outside the 37th session of the Assembly of the Heads of State and Government of the African Union. During the meeting, the two ministers examined means of reinforcing cooperation between the two countries and exchanged views and analysis on the current political and security situation in the Sahel-Sahara region. The two parties also discussed the main issues of the African summit's agenda. Algeria has urged the Libyan parties to seize the opportunity of the National Reconciliation Conference to be held in Sirte next April to restore cohesion among the Libyan people. Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf encouraged the Libyan parties to effectively join the UN efforts aimed at creating the necessary conditions for the organization of elections.
Algeria calls on the Libyan parties to seize and take advantage of this precious opportunity to restore cohesion among the Libyan state, people and government. Algeria encourages the Libyan parties to effectively adhere to the UN efforts aimed at creating the necessary conditions for the organization of elections as a permanent and lasting solution to the crisis which has lasted too long in this brotherly country. Algeria reaffirms the need to put an end to foreign interference and reiterates her call for the withdrawal of all foreign parties from Libya to enable the African and UN efforts to reach the noble aim of enabling the Libyan sisterly country to start a new era of security, stability, peace and flourishment.
Mr. Attaf further expressed on behalf of the President of the Republic his gratitude to President of the Republic of the Congo, Denis Sassou Nguesso, for his constant efforts at the head of the high-level committee of the AU in favor of reconciliation among the Libyan people. And the Minister of Foreign Affairs and National Community Abroad, Ahmed Attaf, has called on African countries to support the Palestinian cause and contribute to the international diplomatic efforts. In his capacity as representative of President Abdelmadjid Tebboune to the African Union 37th Ordinary Session of the Heads of State and Government, Mr. Attaf said the Palestinian cause urgently needs the support of the African continent.
The Palestinian cause is in great need now more than ever to the support of our continent, as it is going through the most serious phases of its history, while the Zionist occupation is speeding up the implementation of its plan to liquidate the Palestinian National Project, bury the two-state solution, and relaunch the project of the Great Israel.
He reiterated Algeria's calls on African countries to pull international diplomatic efforts to support the Palestinian cause.
Algeria calls on the African countries gathering under the aegis of this organization to pull international diplomatic efforts on three main levels. The first one is that of priorities of an urgent nature, which include taking action to stop the Zionist aggression against the Gaza Strip. The second is to end the immunity granted unfairly to the Israeli occupier. The third one is establishing a Palestinian state within the 1967 borders with Al-Quds as capital.
He added that Algeria is currently working in coordination with the Republic of South Africa to implement the provisional measures decided by the International Court of Justice through a binding resolution of the UN Security Council. And to the Middle East now, as the Palestinian presidency reiterated that the creation of a Palestinian state with occupied Jerusalem as its capital remains key for the region's stability. The Israeli occupation pursues its bombardments of Gaza, causing more deaths. The details with Miriam Barshu is now with me in the studio. Hi, Miriam.
Hi, Asia. Palestinian sources indicated that over 100 people were killed in new airstrike carried out by the Israeli army against the central part of Gaza and the southern towns of Khan Yunis and Rafah. The area of Rafah bordering Egypt is already sheltering 1.4 million displaced. In this connection, Amnesty International once again stressed the necessity to end Israel's occupation of Palestine and to the human rights violations targeting the Palestinians. The organization's Secretary General recalled that the Israeli occupation of the Palestinian territories, the longest and the most murderous in the world, constitute a blatant violation of international law. The Israeli army, which is deployed near Rafah, said it was working out plans for the evacuation of civilians ahead of an offensive on the area. This came as President Lula of Brazil accused Israel of perpetrating a genocide against the Palestinians. Meanwhile, the Palestinian presidency spokesman affirmed that unless the independent Palestinian state was established, the region will remain on fire and confronted to endless wars.
You're still listening to Radio Algeria International, and Algeria will host the upcoming 7th Gas Exporting Countries Forum from February 29th to March 2nd, and the details with Mariam Barshi.
The main researcher at the Institute of Energy Economics in Japan, Mr. Hashimoto, declared that Algeria should and can lead efforts aiming to make cleaner and more efficient the gas supply chain within the GECF. The value chain of the gas industry contains the exploration, production, transport, storage, marketing, as well as the processing of natural gas and its contribution. Evoking the major role of Algeria, notably as a reliable gas supplier, the gas expert highlighted that it is certain that Algeria will become a greater gas supplier for Europe in the coming years. Mr. Hashimoto also noted that the GECF has always been and will always be a very efficient and major communication platform among gas exporting countries. The Japanese expert, whose country was one of the first importers of Algerian natural gas in the 1960s, said that amid current challenging situation marked by geopolitical tensions which impact the global energy markets, notably the gas industry, the role of the GECF will become even more important in promoting the buyer-seller cooperation in order to develop gas as a cleaner energy source. Created in 1966, the Institute of Energy Economics in Japan is a state research center which conducts studies in the field of energy from an economic perspective in order to contribute to the appropriate development of Japanese industries. It also deals with issues such as environmental problem and international energy cooperation. The member countries of the GECF represent 70% of the world gas reserve, more than 40% of the marketed production, and 40% of the global exported gas. Moreover, those countries represent more than half of the world's liquefied natural gas exports. Over to you, Essia.
Thank you, Mariam. And 14 hours, 42 minutes Algeria's time. You're still listening to Radio Algeria International, and I invite you now to listen to our economic program presented by Saïd Bouazi.
Hi and welcome to our weekly program devoted to Algerian economic news. First in the news, the President of the Republic, Abdelmadjid Tebboune, has announced that the year 2024 will see the creation of free trade zones between Algeria and 5 African countries. In a speech delivered via video conference on the occasion of the 41st meeting of the Steering Committee of Heads of State and Government of the new Partnership for Africa's Development, NEPAD, the President of the Republic announced that in 2024, Algeria will see the creation of free trade zones with sister countries starting with Mauritania, followed by Sahel countries such as Mali and Niger, as well as Tunisia and Libya. The Algerian Union Bank has inaugurated its new commercial branch in Nouadhibou, Mauritania, with the aim of providing local services, strengthening trade, and promoting the economic dynamic between the two sister countries. The new branch was officially inaugurated by the chairman of the OB Board of Directors, Ali Qadri, who underlined the determination of the Algerian authorities to strengthen cooperation relations with Mauritania in all areas, particularly those relating to development and the economy. Huawei Algeria has been certified Top Employer 2024 in Algeria for the 4th consecutive time by the Top Employers Institute in recognition of the excellence of its human resources practices, according to a press release from the Chinese telecommunications company. Each year, the Top Employers Institute, the global benchmark for recognizing excellence in human resources practices, certifies companies that are committed to creating the best possible working environment for their employees by adopting HR policies and practices that place people at the heart of their concerns, notes Huawei. The Secretary General of the Gas Exporting Countries Forum GECF, Mohammed Hamel, has assured delegates that preparations for the 7th Summit of Heads of State and Government of the Gas Exporting Countries Forum GECF, scheduled to take place from 29 February to 2nd March in Algiers, have mobilized all the necessary resources, ensuring the ideal conditions for a successful event. Mohammed Hamel, who during his stay in Algeria and the accompanying delegation visited a number of sites involved in the event and held talks with a number of senior Algerian officials, underlined his conviction that the summit will go beyond discussions and collaboration, adding that it offers delegates the opportunity to immerse themselves in Algeria's distinctive culture and warm hospitality. In more Algerian economic news, the Algerian insurance company CAT and the Algerian Startup Fund ASF have signed an agreement in Algiers to provide insurance cover tailored to the nature of startups for the benefit of ASF funding recipients. The main purpose of the agreement is to serve as a link between the ASF and the CAT to facilitate procedures for obtaining insurance cover solutions designed specifically for startups whose activities are characterized by the presence of several risks. The Minister of Finance, Laziz Fayed, has said that opening up the capital of the Popular Credit of Algeria, CPA, by listing it on the stock exchange is part of the reform of the banking sector to establish good governance and transparency as essential criteria and to revitalize the Algiers Stock Exchange so that it could make an effective contribution to financing investment. At a meeting organized by the CPA in Algiers to discuss this operation, the Minister said that opening up the capital of this public bank was of key importance in strengthening our financial system, in that it aims to reform and reorganize the banking sector in our country to enshrine good governance, transparency and efficiency. The Minister of Energy and Mines, Mohamed Arkab, has received in Algiers a Turkish parliamentary delegation led by the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the Grand National Assembly of the Turkish Republic, Fuad Oktay, with whom he discussed the state and prospects of bilateral cooperation in the field of energy and mines, as well as the means for its reinforcement. During the meeting, the two parties reviewed the main achievements and current and future projects, especially since the 11th meeting of the Algerian-Turkish Joint Commission and the Forum of Businessmen devoted to energy and mines in 2021 in Algiers. And to wrap it up, the Minister of Trade and Export Promotion, Tayyip Zitouni, has received the Turkish parliamentary delegation in Algiers, led by the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the Turkish Grand National Assembly, Fuad Oktay, with whom he discussed ways and means of strengthening economic cooperation between the two countries. During the meeting, which took place in the presence of the Turkish ambassador to Algiers, Mohammed Mujahid Kujuk Yilmaz, the two parties reviewed the cooperation between the two brotherly countries and ways of extending it to other areas. And with this, we come to the end of our weekly program devoted to Algerian economic news. Goodbye.
The international event of the week.
The Israeli army relentlessly pursued its attacks on Gaza this week, causing more casualties and chaos in the devastated enclave. One of the most violent attacks was the assault launched by the Israeli forces on Gaza's main hospital in the southern town of Khan Yunis, forcing the medical staff and the patients to flee. The operation carried out against Al-Nasser Hospital, one of the few facilities still functioning in Gaza, came after the Israeli army ordered thousands of people displaced by the fighting to leave the hospital site where they had sought refuge. The Israeli raid triggered off a chaotic situation, as Médecins Sans Frontières put it, at a time when the Israeli airstrikes on other parts of Gaza continue to claim more lives. Asked about how the international community could contribute to ensuring the protection of Gaza's population as provided for by the International Convention, at a time when the UN and the humanitarian organizations affirm that there is no safe area in the enclave, our political analyst Hammoud Salhi had this to say.
It is clear that the international community, particularly organizations like the United Nations and other tools of international law, the European Union for that matter, needs to do more. The recent ruling by the International Court of Justice that found Israel allegedly committing acts that amount to a genocide and crimes against humanity is a step in the right direction. That ruling now is expected to be implemented, and it is up to the United Nations Security Council to take those rulings and implementing them. The tragedy here is that the United Nations Security Council appears to be or is being held under the United States veto. United States has refused time and time again to vote on any measure that would indict Israel. But there is another possibility, so engaging the United Nations Security Council, moving perhaps to the United Nations General Assembly to issue other resolution could put pressure on Israel, and perhaps that way that could lead to Israel to stop. Another way is the fact that the ICJ, a landmark decision, a decision that found Israel engaged in a genocide of the Palestinian people. The genocide makes it, at this point, for the members or those signatories of the Genocide Convention, responsibility to execute the order on their own and put an end to Israel's genocidal acts in Gaza. An appeal court ordered the Dutch government this week to seize exports of F-35 components to Israel, is saying that there is a clear risk that the F-35 parts to be exported will be used in committing serious violation of international humanitarian law. And it is in this context that the court barred the selling of those parts. This kind of decision fit very well with under the ICJ ruling, and it gives the state the ability to take actions against Israel. It is this is another way of how the international community can stop or can help protect the Palestinians.
The operation launched by the Israeli army against the Al-Nasser hospital came as the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reaffirmed his determination to push ahead with an offensive in the city of Rafah, on the border with Egypt, despite serious concerns expressed by several countries and international aid organizations. US President Joe Biden warned the Israeli government against an invasion plan of Rafah and reiterated his country's opposition to any forced displacement of Palestinians from Gaza. He was quoted as saying that many people who have been displaced multiple times fleeing the violence are now packed into Rafah, exposed and vulnerable and in need of protection. In a similar move, the UK Foreign Secretary David Cameron said Israel should stop and think seriously before taking further action in Rafah, where half of Gaza's population, estimated at 2.3 million, are now massed. According to the UN, about 80% of Gaza's population have been displaced by the fighting, raging for over 4 months now. Asked if the Israeli government was determined to carry on its military campaign in Gaza's southern parts, despite serious concerns at the consequences of a planned operations in Rafah, our political analyst Hammoud Salhi had the following.
At the current juncture, all indications point that the Israeli Prime Minister is determined to go through this with another genocidal act against the Palestinians in Rafah. In addition, we see that the U.S., as we have seen so far, the United States has been his strongest ally, and the United States has refrained from taking practical actions to stop Netanyahu. This is another indication that Netanyahu would not stop from moving forward. Netanyahu and American President Joe Biden, in this perspective, appear to be determined to move forward with this genocide. And as another example of that is that statement that President Biden has made so far calls only on Netanyahu to ensure that civilians are protected. This statement by the president have never included a call for a ceasefire or Israel to refrain from assaulting the Palestinians. This is not unexpected, considering that Netanyahu's political survival is at stake. But this should not undermine the fact that he is a staunch enemy of Palestinians and who has strongly advocated the expulsion of Palestinians from their home in Palestine time and time again. His current government openly supports the eradications of Palestinians. However, one should not interpret Netanyahu's current, or there are those who interpret Netanyahu's current position as designed as a way to put pressure on the Palestinians to accept his terms to release the hostages, meaning this group thinks that Netanyahu is using this position to gain leverage against the Palestinian. But regardless of this tactical, whether this is tactical or strategic, what remain clear is that such a behavior runs against Netanyahu's behavioral patterns and approach to past negotiation. So from that perspective, the indication that we've seen so far are moving forward to see Netanyahu committing yet another genocide in Rafah.
This week, the International Court of Justice, ICJ, affirmed that Israel must comply with the ruling it issued on January 26th in response to an urgent request submitted by South Africa, asking the UN Stop Court to issue a new order to prevent further imminent breaches of the rights of the Palestinians in Gaza, in a clear reference to the planned offensive on Rafah. In its ruling, the ICJ noted that the recent events which took place in the Gaza Strip, and more particularly in Rafah, would lead to an exponential aggravation of what is already a humanitarian nightmare with uncalculated regional consequences, as earlier stated by the UN Secretary-General. The court's judges stressed that the alarming situation required the immediate and effective implementation by the Israeli government of the emergency measures it previously ordered and which apply to the Gaza Strip, including Rafah. Asked about whether Israel will comply with the emergency measures already ordered by the ICJ, despite the increasing death toll in Gaza, our political analyst Hamoud Salhi commented the issue.
Israel will most likely not comply with the International Court of Justice ruling, as it has done in the past. Israel will most likely attack the court, present itself, that is Israel, as the victim, and it will give us yet another example of how it presents itself as in the right, while the Palestinians are always in the wrong. It will, without no doubt, continue to slaughter the Palestinians in Gaza, as it has been doing for quite some time now, all without giving regard to the international law or the court decision. But there are applications to this action, and the Israeli leadership is fully aware of the consequences consequences. The Israeli leadership today is mentioned on several occasions about its discomfort being seen itself isolated, and the world is seeing the assault on Palestinians in Gaza as no longer unnoticed, and is the fact that Israel is being accused of genocide. All this makes the Israelis uncomfortable. Just the same thing with the United States. The changes in how people perceive the Biden administration because of Gaza will likely cause the Biden administration and the Democrat the upcoming elections, both legislative and presidential. This is all to say that Israel may not heed the International Court decision, or it may continue and will continue to do what it's doing, what is known for at this point. But it is certainly, there is change today, and sooner than later, Israel will pay the consequences.
Let's recall that over 28,800 Palestinians have been killed since Israel launched its operation in Gaza last October.
Settima cumbre dello